I've got noon already. We'll call the meeting to order for October 5th for our agenda prep. And I'll do roll call real quick. Ms. Hanson, Ms. Halsey, Mr. McLaughlin,
Present.
Ms. Villapando, Ms. Costilla. Can you answer out? I don't see you. And Mr. Arredondo?
Here.
Okay, Ms. Costilla, you're here, right? All 7 board members present. I don't have anything for the public forum. I don't have any comments that were sent in. So we'll turn the meeting over to the superintendent to review our agenda.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think we had a really good start to the official start to the year. So I was up at the high school this morning, and all of cabinet were at different campuses, and you know, there's a few glitches we're working on. We have a debrief with our principals at 2:30 this afternoon, mainly around the survey, but we're working with our parents through that. But I think for the most part, our staffs did a great job getting everybody in, and the kids at the high school all were masked up, so that's a good thing. And so we're in a good place. But if I think you should see the agenda on for it's a short agenda for October. We'll have our superintendent's report, and then item 5, we're going to have an academic update, which is A1. Dr. Valadez will present a bilingual update, as we have to every year. And then we are going to present a CARES funding presentation. Mr. Mike Doyle, who's over our title funding, will kind of give you a picture from March of the CARES funding and what we have used that funding for our teachers and students. Item 5B, we will have a construction update. Mr. Sandoval will present a construction update. For those of you who are at Miller, who have kids at Miller, I think they did a really good job of getting that place up to speed. It's still going to be chaotic here for the next few months, but he seems to be living out there in De Zavala right now. Item 6 is the approval of minutes for the regular scheduled board meeting on September 21st, 2020, and the special call meeting on October 5th. Item 7A will become discussion and possible action pertaining to early exit incentive for SMCISD employees. We will consider approval of budget amendments all the way down to the very end, since there's a couple of potential action items, and that affects the budget amendments. So we're going to just flip that all the way down to the bottom. Item 7C is a resolution adopting a one-time employee retention incentive payment for all district employees through 2021 school year. And then I guess after I'm done, we'll take the questions on those items. And then item D, which will be C, will be consider approval of 2020-2021 T-test appraisers, which is who we bring to y'all every year so you can approve who's going to be doing. And then item D will actually become consider approval of budget amendments.
Okay.
And that's really it. I'm going to turn my phone on, or I'm going to turn my computer on mute, and then we'll be ready to answer any questions.
I had a question on, let me see which one we said it was. I had a question on the first one for the incentive for minutes regular. The early exit incentive for SMCISD. On that one, do we have an amount or do we have a date? for early exit. Could Lupe or Kathy, that I think y'all brought that one up. Could y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So my question was on the early incentive pertaining to early exit incentive. Could you be more specific on that, either Lupe or?
Yeah, I was sorry, Clem, I was trying to unmute this thing and it wasn't working. So I've had some problems with it before. It was in my discussion with the superintendent. My question to him was regarding this one was an immediate early exit incentive. Like if somebody wants to leave right now, they could. This is, as I have explained to some individuals that have approached me about this, is that every year we have this early incentive, and it usually is in the spring. Some of these teachers, I guess, did not realize the extent of COVID, and so did not go forward with doing or seeking information in regards to that. And so now some of them are wanting to know whether they can possibly leave. So my discussion with the superintendent was that I wanted the impact to the school district, budgetary, and of course vacancies, and whether it was something that was feasible that we could present and vote on, and or if there is some authority for it, or to provide this incentive to the employees. So I'm assuming that the administration is going to give us information pertaining to the impact, the financial impact, and even to the number of employees that would be affected by this, could be affected, will take advantage of it, and where would that leave us? So I'm looking for information pertaining to all of that.
Clem.
So is this a proposal from Costilla Hansen? Do they have a set amount for this? Or is this Michael's recommendation?
No.
What is the dollar amount?
Mr. McLaughlin, I did not set a dollar amount. I do not know. This is why on my request to him, I wanted all information pertaining to how many employees might take advantage of this, what would be the impact of it. So I really don't know. This is something that I presented to him that I felt that we needed to find out. And I wanted for all the board to share that information and decide how they wanted to proceed, if they wanted to proceed at all.
My concern on the impact is more the vacancies they'll be leaving and whether those people can be replaced.
I would, Madam President.
Ms. Halsey had her hand up. Can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just wondering if we were talking about an incentive pay retroactive to people who retired already, or this is a new incentive going forward. I'm confused as to what the time.
It would be a new incentive, the ones that we primarily present in the spring of 2021, that we do all this. I'm assuming we do this all the time. Is that correct, Mr. Superintendent?
We do this in spring. So the
Right.
idea from conversations with Trustee Costilla is that typically there are teachers who do retire, like they have to go through the end of January to retire. So retirement's one part. Some people leave, spouses relocate. We had talked initially in spring that typically it's about 10 to 15 people. The board will authorize an X amount of dollars and a number. We've never, ever come close to, I think 50 was the original. And I think we typically are between 10 and 15. Dr. Baez will have some information because it does affect those who are retiring. It could affect their annuities. There could be some TRS implications. And also, there are some implications for, if a teacher or a staff member leaves, let's say January 31st, and then goes to a neighboring district and starts working again, that potentially could be a fact that we would have to have conversations around. So I think that's everybody. It was mainly the conversation was mainly about this is an unsettling time right now for a lot of people, and there have been some people that have approached us about leaving right now, and so we do one in spring, but they missed that window, so now there was just another window this fall.
Ms. Cantu.
Yes, Mr. Arredondo?
So I have several questions. I guess my first one is for human resources. If the board were to approve this incentive, and let's say that we had at a minimum 10 classroom teachers across the ISD at various grade levels decide that they were leaving at semester, what challenges would that create for filling? I mean, I'm assuming every teacher right now has a classroom of students that they're assigned. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if we had 10 or more teachers leave at semester, do we have an applicant pool of staff who are ready to come in and fill those gaps that are then created by this program?
So we continue to fill that pool, but I guess one of the questions we need to be clear about are we talking about resignations or retirement? Because, folks that are making those decisions, it's part of the contract. You have to do that within the 45-day, right? So if that doesn't happen, then contractually, in the past, districts can sanction certifications. We have not been doing any of that. We have had a couple people resign because they moved or whatever, but so I guess we need to be, the question is, are we talking retirement and resignations or retirements only?
So,
and then the guidance given, we can't do mid-year retirement. We have to offer a retention incentive.
so
Give us a better idea.
One, I'd be much more in favor of a retention incentive to hopefully keep as many staff as we can through the duration of this academic year. Secondly, I would assume that these resignations would be somewhat connected to us requiring all staff to return physically to work. I would be more amicable or interested in providing them the option to work from home if that retained their employment through the duration of the academic year, versus us giving them a check to quit mid-year and leave classrooms across the ISD without a teacher, and human resources scrambling to fill these positions in the middle of an academic year. Unless we have teachers who are not assigned students, which I don't think that's the case, I know I would not want to have my child in a class with a teacher that leaves mid-year and expecting a new hire to fill in that gap for the remainder of 2020, 2021. So is it my understanding that the exit incentive was trustee driven and the retention incentive is administration driven? Or are both of these incentives board driven requests?
They're both board driven requests.
Okay.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes, Ms. Halsey had her hand up. I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay.
see.
That's right.
Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. So on the incentive to retain employees, can somebody explain that, what the dollar amount is that we're talking about, the timing, the origins of this, please?
I can address that a little, and Mr. Cardona, you can update. I requested, along with Lupe as second, to look at this as a possibility for a part of the December paycheck, an extra amount for people who stay through the end of the school year to honor their extra efforts. We don't have an exact amount at this time because superintendent is looking at what is feasible without us having financial problems.
Great, thanks. Because I was going to ask if we could add an item to the agenda to do a one-time $1,000 payment to all employees in November, which is also a retention effort in some respects, given that other neighboring districts are doing mid-year pay raises. So I don't know if that needs to be a separate item or if that would fall under the same agenda item or how that would work exactly, but I would like to have that conversation.
So currently it'd be about 1,200 employees that would be affected by the one-time $500 retention incentive, which would be what, $600,000 one time in December. And then if you're asking for $1,000, it'd be 1.2 million.
So I'm assuming we just discussed that under this item at the meeting. Does that make sense?
There is a resolution that Juan Cruz sent us, so that whatever the retention incentive that's decided upon by the board we would fill in the time and then the amount, and then there would be requirements of the employees to have to fulfill their duties through the end of the year, and if they do, then right, they'd get it in November, December, but if they don't, then their last paycheck, we would recoup that money from their last paycheck. Mr. Barton can correct me if I'm wrong.
Ms. Cantu,
Yes, Mr. Arredondo.
I would ask that my colleagues tonight or today, as we discuss this, setting parameters and maybe differentiating between this incentive across all ISD employees. Obviously, I think a custodian who makes $17,000 a year and an executive director who makes $76,000 a year, those are two very different positions, and everyone getting $500 or $1,000. I mean, I think there should be a conversation around that, right? I mean, if our highest paid employee and our lowest paid employee are receiving the same amount, I don't know. I just food for thought as we kind of discuss this. And I guess going back to, so now we have 3 proposals that are now floating around. So we have an exit incentive that was brought forward by Trustees Hansen and Costilla, a retention stipend brought by the same 2 requesting trustees, and now an additional one-time stipend brought forward by Ms. Halsey. But the first 2, we have no set amounts, correct?
I think that we should get information from administration as to how each one of these would impact our budget. I know
But we don't
that,
even have dollar amounts on the first 2.
correct.
Well, the second one was for $500, but I asked that the superintendent review that amount and see what's feasible.
Okay.
Ms.
We-
Cantu?
Ms. Costilla?
Yes, just to follow up, not really so much follow up, but to address the agenda item that I discussed with the superintendent regarding the early exit. And in discussing that with him, he indicated to me that there was already some interest from some employees that or early retirement, that or in the process, that would be in the process of retirement. This was as the issue is that how many of those, and if so, what would be the impact? And like Mr. Arredondo talked about the vacancy, what will we do with the vacancy? So all that information, all that was requested from the administration for the board as a whole to discuss and get informed and determine whether this is something that is feasible for us. This is not something that I am pursuing on a very active issue. I've had conversations with some teachers, and he had mentioned that there was some interest in regards to that they were also looking at possibly to see what could be done. Could we do it now? If this is not something that is feasible based on whatever information regarding the vacancies, how would we address that regarding how much money we would spend, whether it would be feasible for the board to do it or not. That's for all of us to digest and hear the superintendent from that information and see what we want to do, whether we want to do anything at all. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay. My question to administration at this point would also be on any incentive pay, if it's a stipend or an addition amount, do they remove taxes, retirement money, all of that is taken from that amount?
Yes. To my knowledge, yes. So just to clarify between the two, this board has never had an actual number of people who they know use the early exit, the typical, you allocate an X number of dollars up to, typically it's 50 slots and $150,000 is what typically the board has voted on. So you've never actually known a number. But we can get that for y'all for the past, well, since we started implementing it, I believe was Mr. Watson's last year. So we can get you those X number that have taken advantage in the dot. So at least you can see kind of an average amount.
Mrs. President Cantu,
Mr. McLaughlin?
on that bonus, whatever they call it, retention provision, I would just like that to be as open-ended on the agenda as possible. I think this is the third straight month we've dealt with something like this, and I'll join whatever request to agendize it, for the purposes of making that clear. But I wouldn't want to be, I think in the past 2 months it's been very specific, and I probably could have supported something, but it was agendized so specifically I couldn't. And that's why it keeps coming back to us. And so I don't want to make the same mistake on the other end, and at least from my perspective, and agendize $500 and have Ms. Halsey either have a dueling agenda item, or oppose the $500 because she doesn't feel it's generous enough. I think we just open it up, and it's a light agenda. We can talk it out as a group and then hopefully coalesce around something.
And I agree. That's why it's listed. I asked that it be listed the way it is, so that we can make that decision.
I have a couple of additional questions, Ms. Cantu.
Okay, Mr. Arredondo.
So if some trustees incentivize teachers leaving at mid-year, I would like to see from a human resources and a curriculum and instruction standpoint what training for those new teachers looks like if they're being brought on over the Christmas holidays. Are they going to have the same type of in-service and training that the teachers received the 3 weeks prior to in-person instruction? I'm assuming that is just not possible, because I don't know if there's 3 weeks built into a month of January prior to the start of school to do that. So again, I would like to see how that is going to be managed, or even if it's a realistic thing to do for 10, 15, 20 new teachers mid-year. But again, I would like to hear the administration's perspective on that, or if they think that's even possible or feasible prior to the start of the spring semester.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes, Ms. Costilla?
And I will follow up with Mr. Arredondo. I think in my conversation with Mr. Superintendent, that's exactly what in addressing this particular agenda item was also not only the budget, but the vacancies that would come up. How are we going to fill them? Whether it would be a very dire situation for us to be left like that, in filling and could we fill those positions in the training that's required? All that is, I think, is very essential to make a very informed decision whether we're going to go one way or the other one.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember in the past we've had an early incentive for people to retire, because it was going to save us some money at the other end. So, but we're talking about different things here, and so one is retention incentive, and so we're going to pay somebody to stay. I don't understand. When it saves us some money, we do early retirement. So this one has something different where it says a retention to stay. Are we having people leave, but for some reason, we want them to stay, Mr. Cardona? I don't know.
We don't. Dr. Bias can correct me. I think she's got the paperwork in her hand, probably from Juan Cruz, but we can't do a retirement incentive. So it's an early exit,
Early? Yes.
early exit notification.
Well, we've done them in the past. And
We
I'm
typically
sorry,
do them in the
retirement's
spring.
not the word.
Yeah, we
Right.
typically do them in the spring for planning. I think Mr.
Yeah.
Arredondo has mentioned planning, you know, and it kind of helps us plan summer PD. It would create some difficulties, you know, unless we knew in October, then we could front load the PE if we knew who was leaving, or the PD and we knew who was leaving. But, you know, we're trying to navigate the pandemic right now with just online and remote. But then there's the separate piece. And, you know, most people that are going to leave midway through the year probably have enough years. They're really trying to get that one extra year. You have to work through the end of January with X number of days to get a little bit of assistance through TRS. But those are also some of the things we're trying to figure out, like would this affect their TRS or their annuities and things like that. And that's the answers we'll have for y'all for the board meeting.
Ms. Cantu,
Yes, Ms. Costilla?
Ms. Valpando, I think that these two items have been interlocked for whatever reason, I'm guessing the conversation, but the early exit is basically by itself. It has nothing to do with retention. It's just talking about providing these individuals that are already at retirement to maybe leave earlier than wait until the spring. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with retaining them. It's allowing them, giving them the opportunity to leave earlier. That will create vacancies for us. And this is why my questions, my discussion with him was, okay, we need to have covered as to what is going to be the outcome, what is it going to look like as far as impact on this particular item, as far as how much is it going to cost, how many employees are we talking about, how are we going to proceed in filling them. So that's one specific item. It has nothing to do with the retention. The retention, I think that in my conversations with Kathy was that maybe looking at it as maybe as a bonus, as a Christmas bonus for these employees, you know, for you know, under the COVID situations, like giving them some money for Christmas when, you know, a lot of them would probably really appreciate it. So that's my understanding of it, but it had nothing to do with one or the other one. It's two separate items completely.
I understood that.
If I could add to that, Mr. Cruz's guidance was because we didn't express our intention to give a one-time payment later in the school year when we made the compensation plan. This is the proper way to do it, a retention incentive. And I think that's a discussion that everybody might remember we had when we discussed pay raises, is kind of laying down that marker and say, we reserve the right to do that. We didn't do that, so we don't have the freedom that some of the districts around us do to just create a bonus. So we have to do it the legal way, which is the retention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
For speaking about that, when we were voting on the raises, right, when we approved the raises, we said that we would look at an incentive pay or a stipend pay November, December time period. But
that was the recommendation, but that was not the motion that was made.
No, it was not put in a motion. That we just said we'd look at it again in the spring. I mean, in the fall.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes, Mr. Arredondo.
Thank you. This is a question for Superintendent Cardona. Mr. Cardona, through your administration's affiliation with professional organizations like TASB and TASA, is there a possibility that we can lean on them as a resource and see what other districts have done, whether it's through a human resources standpoint, that might not be like a financial incentive to stay? I mean, something that would be built into what human resources is already doing, or Mr. Barton's office, something that is more payroll incentive to retain employees. I mean, I think this is what everyone's getting at is, you know, we're obviously in uncertain times and we want to not only retain employees to the duration of the academic year, but also provide an opportunity for some to exit if they so choose without essentially putting everybody in lifeboats, right, mid-semester and having to hire hundreds of new teachers. So I don't know if there's a more holistic way to do this. I mean, I'm assuming ISDs across the state are trying to figure this out as well. So I don't know if that's something that TASA or TASB or TASBO or all three of those organizations have, you know, some experience or some recommendations of what that could possibly be versus me cooking something up, because we've seen how well those have been received by the board, right, the past 2 months. So
We could reach out to those three organizations and see, and then get something back to y'all. And Trustee Halsey, I see your hands raised, but I don't know if that was from earlier, so I just want to recognize that your hand's blue on the little thing.
I have another agenda request when we're finished with this conversation. So.
Before we leave the retirement issue or leaving exit issue, I know we're not arguing we'll debate the merits of this at the meeting, but I don't see this as a parent. My kids are already having, you know, a disrupted year. They haven't been at school since March 9th or 10th. We've done virtual one way in the spring, a different way in the fall. They're eventually going to be on campus probably pretty soon. And if there was a teacher change this year of all years, to me, it would be really set them back, and would be really frustrating to me that the board had incentivized that. You know, if someone has to leave for their health and they're worried about getting a mark on their, whatever the state keeps for teacher certification, that's one thing, you know, showing some grace there, but to incentivize it as if it's something we want. I mean, like I said, I'll argue against this Monday, but there's just no way I could support that.
I share Mr. McLaughlin's feelings on that. In addition, I'm concerned because we did offer this in the spring, as Ms. Christie acknowledged, you know, really before the severity of COVID was apparent to us. And so I think we had a lot of people that didn't take advantage of it then, people that, you know, retired or have left subsequently. And I'm concerned that then we've missed people. And I just think it's really problematic to take it up at this point.
Is that our discussion?
I have one more comment on this item. Is there, and this might be a question for Mr. Barton or Dr. Baez, so if we were to give like a stipend or a bonus, and I know we don't say bonuses because things get weird when it comes to taxes for employees, right? Are there things that would be recognized as like a financial incentive that I guess wouldn't impact employees, like tax liabilities? Like if we reimburse them for something, or like, does that make sense? Like if we provided reimbursements or other types of financial incentives that aren't essentially in like a paycheck, or that would be like contingent on that, is there any like flexibility of how to get creative with that type of a thing, or no?
No, sir. When someone receives compensation, they have to pay taxes on that compensation. So that's still going to happen one way or the other. The IRS is going to get their share. But to clarify, I'm not sure if this is where you were headed. A one-time payment, such as this retention incentive, is not TRS creditable. So it would not go to their TRS. And that's another challenge that we were trying to understand, and we were able to clarify in the last week.
So I know one of the things that we've talked about before are like benefits, right? Like medical expenses or things like that would not, I guess, be, and I don't know if those are taxable or how that would work. But again, in that same way, again, I guess that's an administration thing to figure out, or whenever you talk to TASA and TASBO and TASB to see what other ISDs have done. But similarly to Trustee McLaughlin and Trustee Halsey, I mean, my younger sister's out of the system, and I have a couple of younger cousins who are currently enrolled. And if I found out that their teacher was leaving at mid-year and a new teacher was coming in, and we were all going to try and figure this out in the spring, I think frustrations would be even higher than they already are for some ISD families. So yeah, we can, I guess, talk about that at this upcoming meeting, but I just...
Ms. Cantu?
Yes, Ms. Costin.
Ms. Cantu, in addressing Mr. McLaughlin's and Ms. Halsey's and Mr. Arredondo's, once again, this was an item that I presented to them for discussion purposes only, keep in mind that, you know, whether that teacher leaves in December or that teacher that's retired is gonna leave anyway. Yes, it might leave halfway through the year, and there's gonna be changes when the year ends for that particular course or whatever, whether it's an elementary school or whatever it is. That's very understandable, and having had dealt with teachers in the past, with having my own kids and even my own grandkids and having to deal with teachers, I understand that. Once again, this is for the purpose of discussion from the board. It's not just something that I am driving, that I am adamant about. I want impact from, and I think it's important that teachers out there hear that we're talking about it, but based on all the factors that are being presented to us, maybe it is, maybe it's not feasible. That's exactly where I'm at. I'm not anywhere else with this. I mean, everybody's going to have a different argument to it, and that's understandable. But I think that it is important that the teachers, the ones that are looking at this possibility, understand where we're coming from, where the rest of the board is coming from, and maybe it's not something that's feasible. And I don't have any problem with somebody saying, well, I cannot support that. I have no problem with that at all.
Thank you, Ms. Costilla. I think we've had a pretty lively discussion, and so we'll continue that at the regular board meeting. Are there any other items we need to discuss?
Miss,
Something.
Ms. Halsey?
Yeah, thanks. Mine's a sort of two-part request. I was hoping that administration could give us a brief presentation report on social emotional programming throughout the district that's currently underway and plans for the upcoming year. And then I'd also like to have an action discussion item for the hiring of an additional social emotional counselor at the high school and a clinical therapist.
Item for a social emotional counselor and a therapist.
Please.
Anything else?
For the purposes of agendizing, I'll support those requests if President Cantu, if Ms. Halsey needs a second. It seems like we should mark something in the agenda or during the meeting on the end of Ms. Costilla's really long run as a trustee. I think this is her last meeting. I'm sure she's not going to want us to do anything, but there's 6 of us and only 1 of her. So I don't know what it looks like, but I would be open to maybe talking to you after the meeting, Ms. Cantu, or something.
I think that would be a very good discussion to have.
Okay.
I agree.
In fact, there may already be something going on.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Cantu?
If you'd like to talk to me about it later, I'm open to that one-on-one, but
Okay.
that was not going
Ms.
to.
Cantu?
Yes.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes, Ms. Costilla.
It was mentioned to me some time ago, and I would really appreciate, I really don't want any fanfare. Mr. McLaughlin mentioned my last meeting. It will be my last meeting. I will be there in November to canvass vote whoever wins. And basically that, you know, just for a few minutes. But formally, you know, this will be, and I appreciate anything anybody's doing, but I really prefer no fanfare at all. Thank you.
Okay, we will not have a fanfare.
No balloons.
No,
No band.
Ready?
No pink cake.
No.
Yeah,
no.
we got pink cake.
No pink cake.
Thank you.
Miss Cantu, before we exit that, because there was a question earlier, and so I do have the numbers. I don't know if y'all want to write them down. In 2017, 2018, the total number of early incentive applicants was 20. 6 of them retired. 14 of them resigned. 2018, 2019, it was 16 early incentive. It was 12 retire, 4 resignation. And then last year it was 22 early incentive. It was 18 retire and 4 resignation. And the total spent over those 3 years was $122,521.67. So it's about It was 33, 32, and then 55,000. And I'll send you this. I'll send you the information. I'll email it later on. This little image.
That's great. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Ms.
I
Cantu,
move that
one
we
second.
adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more question.
Okay, Mr. Redondo.
So this goes back to the incentive retirement thing that we were talking about. I guess my perception is that there were several employees who, once the ISD's reopening plan became official, decided to retire. If there's a way to figure out the number of retirees or resignation between the end of this past spring's retirement, resignation, exit incentive and the beginning of school and what those positions were, I would like that information as well included in the presentation in which we talk about incentive, retention, so on and so forth. Thank you. And that's it, Ms. Cantu.
Okay, now we'll entertain a motion.
I move.
Second.
Thank you. Who's second? Mr. McLaughlin,
Mr.
second.
Redondo, I was just voting.
Oh, you're ready for the vote. All in favor of adjourning, raise your
Aye.
hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ms.
I
Villapana
am, yes, I am.
and
Thank
Ms.
you.
Who was the second?
Redondo.
Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Okay.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.